The next category, which is halacha kaf or yod aleph, haporesh midarchei tzibur. This is a very interesting and important category, because as Rambam says, af al pi shelo avar averot, we're not talking about a person who in any way transgresses any aspect of the Torah. He lives according to all the mitzvot aseh and lo ta'aseh of the Torah. Ela nivdal me'adat Yisrael. He separates himself from the rest of Adat Yisrael, of Klal Yisrael. We'no oseh mitzvot bichlalam. In other words, he does not, he, as it were, lives independently, doesn't feel himself part of the Jewish people. He does not really bother himself too much with various dire straits in which the Jewish people find themselves. And if a fast day is declared for such a reason, he doesn't feel himself obligated to participate. Essentially, in terms of his national identification with the Jewish people, he feels and acts like a Gentile in that he's unconnected. He's not involved. He's a bystander. As if he's not one of them, of the Jewish people. Such a person, one could make the argument, I think this must be said, that the Haredi world, or at least parts of the Haredi world, could be accused of a form of behavior and existence and lifestyle, or shall we say, outlook on the world and on reality, which is reminiscent of what is being discussed here. I'll give an example. I heard some months ago a particular Haredi Rav, whose name I do not recall, and it's not important, in responding to a question where he was asked, this was, in other words, during the current war, ongoing, he was asked about whether he doesn't feel some sense of gratitude and obligation or something like that towards soldiers fighting, amongst other things, for him. It's clear what would happen to him if there were not soldiers fighting against Am Yisrael's enemies. And his response, and I will admit, maybe not every Haredi would respond this way. It's quite possible. I haven't obviously interviewed every Haredi, but this is what he said, and it's on the internet somewhere. You can hear it. He said, "Why do you ask me that question? A soldier is just doing his job. That's his job, and he's doing what he has to do. Just like the garbage collectors who come around with their truck and empty the garbage cans and fixtures. They're just doing their job. I don't go out and say thank you to them. That's what they have to do. That's their job, and that's their task, and they do it. And you don't ask me if I thank them for what they do, and why should you ask me if I thank the soldiers for what they're doing?" This literally was, in so many words, that is what he said. And I think one does not need to elaborate regarding how outrageous that response is, and how it bespeaks a complete disconnect between himself and the Jewish people. All he sees is himself, his family, and his community. People who are exactly like him. He doesn't see the other Jews at all. Doesn't feel any real connection or meaningful identification with the Jewish people as a whole. Now, I know that many people will say that is because a person such as himself views the state of Israel as either unnecessary or perhaps from its inception, by definition, mistaken, evil, misguided, unnecessary, superfluous, what have you. There are a number of different arguments and statements you might elicit from various types of Haredim who might, in response to such a question. But and I'm not debating that question right now. This pertains to another discussion which is connected to this, which is someone said to me recently that they had a discussion with a certain individual who is interesting enough. So I was told this person serves in the army in some capacity. Perhaps he's a doctor or something, but he's Haredi leaning, shall we say, or something like that. So this person questioned the fact that this is that we are engaged in a Milchemet Mitzvah. Why? And he said it's clear that the Gedolei Torah of the Haredi world do not consider this to be a Milchemet Mitzvah. And why is that clear to him? Because they do not consider this to be a Jewish state. If it's not a Jewish state, therefore it can't be Milchemet Mitzvah. Well, I consider that claim to be totally spurious and misguided, to put it mildly, because the definition of a Milchemet Mitzvah, the concept of a Milchemet Mitzvah is not contingent upon the existence of an officially constituted or defined Jewish state, so-called. Even if, let's say, in the time of Sefer Shoftim, up until the crowning of Hamelech Shaul, there was no Jewish state. There were tribes. Even after even after Shaul became king, it's not clear whether there really was a functioning, unified Jewish state. That probably only really happened in the time of David HaMelech, quite some time later. But the concept is it not clear that in certain instances when wars were fought with enemies of the Jewish people, even though it was only by perhaps some of the tribes, because there was more local event, is it not clear there was a Milchemet Mitzvah? In Hilchot Melachim u'Milchamot, Perek Hamishi, the 5th chapter of Hilchot Melachim u'Milchamot, and Rambam does connect it to the existence of a Melech, because he's discussing he's including the authority and the duties of the Melech in this discussion. But Rambam goes on to say, "Ena melech nilham tahila ela al milchemet mitzvah." The king is responsible when there is a king. The king is responsible. The national leadership is responsible for addressing such issues. Wa'ezohi milchemet mitzvah, zo milchemet shiv'at amamim u'milchemet amalek wa'ezrat Yisrael misal sheba'alehem. This third category, wa'ezrat Yisrael misal sheba'alehem, does that depend on the existence of a self-defined Jewish state? I don't think so. Let's say there's no state, but there are X number of Jews living in Eretz. It could be in Eretz Yisrael, by the way. It's also true outside of Eretz Yisrael, by the way. Although it's perhaps not exactly referred to by the same term as Milchemet Mitzvah, but we find a similar halacha in the Shulchan Aruch also, which applies also in the Galuth, not just in Eretz Yisrael. That if there is a Jewish area and a non-Jewish area, this is based on an explicit Surya and Masechet Eruvin, and the Goyim attack the Jews on Shabbat. How do the Jews respond? So if they came Iske Kash, whatever, they came only to steal property, then the Jews do not Mahalel Shabbat to oppose them. If they came also to attack and kill, etc., such as happened, for example, on Shemini Aseret Telshin Pedalid, then at the beginning of this war, 7th of October, so-called, the Minyanom, well, that's clearly Aliskei Nefashot. They didn't come just to steal. And the Jews do go out to defend themselves or to fight off the enemy and what have you. This is not mentioned here. This halacha is not mentioned here in Ilchot Melachim Milchamot. It's mentioned in Ilchot Shabbat by Rambam because it applies everywhere, all over the world, anywhere on Shabbat. But is it not clear that that's a necessary? There can be no exemptions from fighting off the Jewish people's enemies in such a situation. It is also stated over there in the Sechet Eruvin that if it's on Zol Sefer, in other words, on the border area, the area which defines the border between the Jewish area and the non-Jewish area, a region which is inhabited mainly by Jews and a region which is inhabited mainly by non-Jews, then whatever their intentions, as soon as we see that they intend to or have begun to cross into the Jewish area, that is, the Jews are to Halal Shabbat immediately and go out and fight them off and what have you. So this is that I think is it's obviously also self-defense. It's also Ezrat Yisrael Misar She'Ba'alehem. In other words, let's say that it's a particular town that's being attacked by these non-Jews, and there's another Jewish town not far away that hears about it, becomes aware of it, and can come and help. Are they not required to do so? I think it's clear they are required to do so. So this third category, at least, of Ezrat Yisrael Mithar She'Ba'alehem applies in all times and all places. It's certainly not dependent upon the existence or non-existence of a so-called Jewish state. How do you define a Jewish state? I also do not know. I'm not sure. Would I agree that a Jewish state is to be run and organized according to the principles and precepts of the Torah? Most definitely. But there is no, in halacha, no clear definition of a Jewish state. So, in so many words. Is this the first time in history that a large number of Jews live in Eretz Yisrael and have their own sovereign government, which does not follow the Torah in every respect? Not at all. If one reads just almost anywhere in the Tanakh, one discovers that this was par for the course most of the time. Did anyone suggest that as therefore there was no Ezrat Yisrael Misar She'Ba'alehem at that during those periods? I don't think so. I've never heard of such a thing. Although clearly not everything was being done according to the Torah. And these things varied, of course. These things, if you were to plot it on a graph, then it would be up, it would be up and down all the time. It wouldn't be a constant line. It wouldn't even be a cosine wave or something. It would be a very erratic, changeable line, which would indicate better and worse periods in terms of to what extent the government of the day considered itself obligated to follow the Torah, to what extent, if at all. There were times when obviously the governments felt no such compunction at all, such as we just mentioned before about Menashe, for example, or Yerovam, or what have you. And there were many other instances, many other periods of time. In fact, that was most of the period covered in the Tanakh. That is the reality. There was some form of Jewish government, and it was not committed to the Torah. The exceptions were David HaMelech for a long period of time, Shlomo HaMelech. There were others as well. There was Yehoash, there was Hizkiyahu, But these are precisely the exceptions, not the rule. A person who essentially considers himself to be untouched and unmoved by the situation, the circumstance of the Jewish people, and to prove the point, what Rambam just mentioned here was lo nichnas b'tharatham v'lo mit'aneh b'ta'anitham. Let's just say we had a functioning central body of Torah leading the Jewish people, which clearly we do not today. And let's say that body were to announce that due to the war and the general circumstance in which we find ourselves, this is an Eth Torah Yaakov, and therefore we have to declare a ta'anith. If that were done, I think it's clear that almost all the Haredim would not fast on that day. I think that's a fact. I don't think I'm being unkind or ungenerous in saying that. I think that's the fact. They would not fast for such a thing. They would say it's nothing to do with us. And that's exactly what this halakha, this concept of haporoshim midarchei tzibur is all about. In other words, you can think, and you may be right, that you understand what Torah Judaism is all about, and you live according to those precepts in your own personal life. You may be right about that, and you may think that there are many others who do not share this understanding and knowledge that you possess, and you may be right about that as well. And you may consider the current regime and system of government of this country to be illegitimate, and you can be right. You could be well be right about that, and I would agree with such a statement. But that does not justify creating some kind of virtual reality inside your head, and within your view of worldview of Torah and Jewish reality, and saying zelo ma'anyanoti, zelo relevanti. It's not relevant. It shouldn't interest us in the least. I understand very well that this position, at least in part, is based on a desire to remain in every way separate from and therefore untainted by people who are far removed from the Torah in every respect. In fact, are anti-Torah in many ways. And I understand that is the reason for that kind of response, or one of the reasons. But it's also based on other things as well. That's not the only reason. And that's not a sufficient reason to adopt that attitude and to refer to soldiers fighting essentially for you as well, and not and as for others also, but not specifically for you, but for all of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael. That cannot justify referring to them or relating to them as garbage collectors who are just doing their job. And to flesh out this point a little bit further, Harav Yitzchak Shilat, Rosh Yeshivat Ma'ale Adumim, mentioned in an article that I saw that he wrote that when he was, I think he was probably in the middle of his years in Yeshivat Hesder I think it was in Yeshivat HaKotel, and during Milchemet Yom Kippurim, Yom Kippur War in Taushin Lamed Dalet, 1973 Leminyana. And he was involved in the fighting, and he sent a question regarding a certain halachic matter pertaining to the answer to which depends on whether it's a Milchemet Mitzvah or not, shall we say. He sent this question to Harav Eliashiv Zetzal of Yosef Shalom Eliashiv. And his response clearly, which is written and which was printed, clearly indicates that he considered it to be a Milchemet Mitzvah. So this strange individual, when this point was mentioned to him, said that, he just meant that metaphorically. Well, anyone who knew Rav Eliashiv, or anyone like Rav Eliashiv Zetzal, knows that I'm not sure he understood and knew the word metaphor, on the one hand. On the other hand, everything he said was expressed in halachic categories. Clearly, he was responding to a halachic question asked by a real world individual in a real world situation, war, and he was asked a particular question, and he related to that question accordingly. So that claim is clearly false and misleading, and cannot be considered a serious response at all. So the point to round off that point, whether the current situation is a Milchemet Mitzvah or not, does not depend on whether there is a Jewish state or there is not a Jewish state, or how you relate to the existing state, which I myself would be happy to wave a wand and change in every possible way immediately. That's not the question. The question is, are there, in this case, millions of Jews living in Eretz Yisrael who are under attack, whose lives and very existence are, the existence of the current generation and future generations of Jews in Eretz Yisrael is endangered. Is that the reality? And that defines whether it's a Milchemet Mitzvah or not. And this is also not in Chutz La'aretz. This is in Eretz Yisrael. So that response is completely unacceptable. And there is definitely an aspect of perisha midarchet me'atzibur in Haredi ideology. Yes, again, I understand where it comes from. It cannot be considered completely without some legitimate basis, but the conclusions and the attitudes and the actions to which this ideology and that set of responses leads are very, very problematic, shall we say, to put it mildly.